How to dig deep with a seller and do giant monster wholesale deals. That's the topic of today's show. This is Todd Toback, and I want to welcome you to the No Limits Real Estate Investing podcast. If this is your first time listening to the show, I've got a gift for you. Head on over to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script. And there I'm going to give you the exact script that we use in our own business to lock up juicy wholesale deals direct with motivated sellers every single day. Now, this is the exact script, by the way, that I used when I first got started. And when I train people, I hand them the exact sheet of paper, and we've improved it and made tweaks over time. But this is actually the real deal, the secret sauce. And so we've used this to do over 1,300 deals. I think I may have said that already. And I've also used it to train thousands of other investors across the country. So go ahead, do yourself a favor and download it today. Go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script. So let's talk about one of my favorite things to do on a sales call or an acquisition call or a motivated seller call, whatever you want to call it. And that is going deep. I tell you what, this one skill is going to be a complete game changer for you because most people play at the surface, right? That's the opposite of going deep. And I haven't talked too much about this because it's really, really hard to convey sometimes over a podcast, but I'm going to do my best. And if you take this stuff, man, I want you to practice it. I want you to absorb it. I wanted to make it a part of your language. You could also use this in other areas of your life, right? Especially in your spouse or your kids or business relationships, because it's going to enable you to gather a lot more information, understand people a lot better, and therefore help. Right? Just help. And the more you help, the bigger solutions that you can offer, the more money that you will make. There is nothing that drives me more crazy than playing at the surface. For me, actually, I am still involved in training our acquisition specialist on how to talk to sellers. And when I hear a recording or a role play and one of our acquisition specialists, they do not go deep, they play at the surface, man, it drives me nuts because I know we are leaving money on the table, and that's something that we don't do on the No Limits Real Estate Investing podcast, and you don't do either if you're listening to this, if I have anything to do with it. So why is it so important, right? Is every motivated seller that calls desperate to do business with you, right? Do they all say, oh, I'm desperate to sell my house. Please come and buy it at 70% of market value. Please, 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 please. Said no seller ever. I can tell you that more sellers than not are actually very guarded, right? Only 10 to 20% of sellers actually kind of open up and tell you the full story, right? And why do they do that? Well, they're doing it to protect themselves, right? Maybe you cold call them or maybe they got a postcard. I tell you what, sellers they're smart, right? They know that we're going to come in and try to buy this house for a profit, which means we're going to try to buy it for less than market value. And so let's take the elephant out of the room. That's what we do, right? We do that. They trade some equity for speed and convenience. And the more comfortable you get with that, and even verbalizing that to the sellers and communicating that to them, man, the more trust you are going to build. When you play at the surface and don't ask tough questions, I can tell you what, you actually lose trust with the seller because you're not building real rapport and you're just playing at the surface, right? Just talking about price is at the surface, right? Just not asking the hard questions and just keeping, real light rapport, that's playing at the surface. So what about the other 80 to 90%? Right? Where are they? What do they do? Well, I can tell you that if you're on the phone with somebody and they say, I want to sell. Some people, I get it. They just want to screw with you and waste your time and, just talk. And I understand there's a portion, but when you're talking to someone on the phone and there's a dialogue going, there's a reason why they're talking to you. If you go to a car lot and you tell the salesperson on the lot, hey, I'm just looking, but yet you're still there, I think you might be interested in buying a car. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't spend my Saturdays and Sundays on a car lot if I'm not interested in buying a car. And so a seller, if they're on the phone with you, maybe, just maybe they're interested in doing business with you, even if they're not telling you everything. So how do you extract this information? How do you get it out from a seller when they are being guarded? Because I could tell you, this is the heart of the no limits selling system, is extracting information from the 80% of sellers who are motivated or who don't even know that they're motivated, right? But are not telling you, and they're not letting it on. And so we've got to use these techniques that I'm going to talk about today. First point, if you're not going deep, you're missing out on 80% of your deals. Okay, if you're looking for that low-hanging fruit for sellers to say, I'm desperate to sell today, come on over. That's great. I love those, but that's a very, very small portion, and you can't run a business on those people. So let's focus on going deep with the other 80% of people. My second point is listen more, talk less. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. 2 ears and 1 mouth. So when you ask a question, and then shut up. Now, you notice that pause? It's a little awkward, right? For me, because I'm doing a podcast, right? But when you're talking to a seller and you ask a question and you leave that pause and you wait for it, you're going to extract a lot more information than if you try to interject space into that noiseless void. Okay? So when you ask a question, it's okay to let the room be quiet. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right? I've had negotiations where I'm sitting there for 30 seconds just looking at the seller. If you shut up, you will be amazed at what the seller says. And by the way, I understand 5 seconds seems like an absolute lifetime. I get it, right? But it's not in the mind of the seller. All right. Next, ask better questions. Ask better questions, specifically open-ended questions. If you say, are you looking to move fast? A seller's going to say, no, unless they fall in that top 20%, right? If you say, does the house need a lot of fix-up? Seller's going to say, no, right? If they're not in that, 10 to 20%. If you say, tell me about the work the house needs. Different question. If you say, can you tell me a little bit about your timeline? Now they say, well, I've got a new job and in 6 months I'm moving. That's different than, are you interested in selling fast? Big, big difference. So I've got some other questions here, right? And again, these are all open-ended. Open-ended is you ask a question that must elicit a response that's not a yes or a no. So for example, what is going to happen if blank, 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 right? Start with that. Or it might be, what are your plans if blank, blank, blank? Or if this happens, what happens then? Practice this open-ended question. You want to extract information, ask something that's going to require not a yes or a no answer, and then listen. Very, very, very important. Now, this is a big one right here. This next one. This is number 4, right? Number 4. Don't glaze over a comment or a question that you did not get the answer to. So many people will ask a question and the seller will answer and they didn't really answer it. And because they don't want to create more conflict or tension or too much friction, they just move on. And I can tell you, I see it all the time in my own company. And so you don't want to glaze over. You want to be sticky, right? You want to be like those sticky balls. You throw it against the wall and boom, it just sticks. You are not going away, okay? So for example, if someone says, well, can you tell me a little bit about, your son who's living in the property? And they're going to say, well, he's there, right? Many people will say, well, okay. And is he paying rent? And they'll say, yeah, pretty much, right? Most people will move on, but they see the seller is not willing to give information and they feel that. And so they stop asking questions. So you want to be sticky and don't glaze over and say, okay, so if you don't mind me asking, can you tell me a little bit about why you said pretty much instead of yes. Now I'm going deep, right? And I'll go a level deeper. And then you could say, well, can you tell me a little bit more about that relationship between you and your son? Okay, now that's the next question. And now I can say, okay, well, hey, the good thing is it sounds like you're okay with him in the property here for the next 12 months, right? I'll do something called the stealth mismatch and go deep there, but I'll find a pain point, right? Find an issue, stick to it, and go deep, 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 deep. Now, if I don't find something and I go 3 or 4 levels deep and there's no problem, well, then I'll go to a new spot and try to find the motivation there. And then I go deep and then deep and then deep and then deep, but don't play at the surface. Don't play on the top, right? You want to get more information. If you find something, if you find a wound, you want to go deep and ask questions and find that wound, make sure that's the wound. So now we can go and help that seller by fixing the wound. Very, very important to have all the information so that we can be a doctor, right? And we can help people and make a lot of money in the process. All right, next, do the give up. Now you may say, Todd, what's the give up? I thought you told me not to give up. I'm an entrepreneur. This is a different kind of give up. It's more like an optical illusion. So sometimes the seller is too guarded and they are not sharing information. They're just giving you one-word answers and they're like, do you want to buy it or not? And some of these are our best deals. So what I do is I will then take a break, and you'll find sometimes that whether you're in person with a seller and maybe you couldn't agree on price, or maybe you're on the phone and trying to get motivation, you just kind of give up on doing the deal and you just build rapport, right? Ask the seller about life or anything not serious, the football or their kids or travel, and just be a friend and forget about the deal for real. Forget about it, play loose, don't worry about it. And this is if you sense something might be there, and just let it go and be like, hey, I get it. It sounds like we're not a fit, and I totally get that. I could recommend some realtors to you, but we're probably not a fit. Hey, let me ask you a question. What do you think of the game this weekend? I know that you said that you were into football. Who do you think is going to win next year? Right. And then build that rapport and build that rapport. But even if you got to stay on the phone for 15 or 20 minutes, if you feel like something's there, go there, make a friend. This works much better in person, by the way. You can do it over the phone. But at that point, then come back to the house, right? And then maybe just say, hey, I'm just curious, by the way. It sounded like we weren't a fit. What was the big issue there? And then come back, and now you can go deeper because you built a friend. So you've kind of softened them up, and then you come back. So you give up, and then you come back around. I love that. All right. Next is if you sense some motivation, but the seller is just not sharing information, go on the appointment, right? You got nothing to lose. Go on the appointment. And you want to build rapport in person. You want to build level 3 rapport. I've done a lot of episodes on this. You got level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3 rapport, I'll go over it briefly. Level 1 is where you just talk on the surface, right? You're talking about people, places, things. Level 2 is where the seller will teach you something. And level 3 is where the seller gives you something. So for me, if you listen to the podcast, I love growing tomatoes. And one of the houses that we bought one time, the lady had a giant tomato garden, dwarfed. Made mine look like a dwarf garden. And she taught me we talked about tomatoes. Then she taught me how she made her giant tomatoes. And then 3, she gave me a basket full of tomatoes to take home with me, which was awesome, right? And we did buy that house, and we did make a lot of money. Awesome deal for everybody, right? Going to the appointment really helped break down some barriers. There are a lot of personal issues that we were able to solve by building that rapport and going deep. All right. Now, this is one of my favorites. You want to get commitments to flush out objections. So if a seller's not going deep with you and you're trying everything, or maybe you want to go deeper, you want to have the seller take the next step. Now, taking the next step, this is getting commitments. It's not always doing the deal with you. Sometimes they need to talk to a spouse or a partner or a financial advisor or a kid or a family member, whatever that is, right? That's okay. You're not going to pressure anyone to do business with you, but you have to move them towards their next step for their right decision. I'm going to repeat that. You have to move them to their next step for their right decision. Not necessarily you, because if you push them in a direction, well, at least you disqualify them. Very, very important. So at the end of every call, I like to get a commitment and say, okay, this is our next step. Even if it's not with me, this is what happens next. Now, when you do that, when you move them forward, That's when the objections start flowing. Man, they start coming, the floodgates open. Well, Todd, I can't do that because my son actually told me he wants to buy the property and he's been trying to get a loan for a year and he still says he wants it. And so I can't do it. Boom. Now, by me asking for that next step, that now gave me that new information. Now I can help that seller to realize that maybe, just maybe, this son of hers is not going to buy the property by a different series of questions. But you always got to get that commitment, because when you do that, their blood pressure will go up, right? They'll get nervous and they'll realize I can't take the next step because X, Y, Z, or I need to do this one thing before I do that, which brings them clarity. Now, my next way to flush out motivation is sometimes people won't tell you anything or they don't even know they're motivated. And that's okay. The selling system has a few guardrails here. You want to send an offer, just a written offer. We send out a written offer to everybody who we don't actually go on an appointment with or rejects our, email, our offer via email. So what we do here at this point is you email everybody at offer, or you could send it snail mail. And a portion of those people, about 1 to every 50 out of 100, will call you back and say, hey, tell me more about this offer. And so I'll say, hey, can you tell me why you called me back? What's changed between now and what happened before? And now the negotiations begin. Very rarely do we use that contract that we emailed out, but it's a great conversation starter and basically starts a new process. All right. Now, here's our last chance. The other issue is you walk away. You walk away. Mr. Seller, it sounds like this isn't a fit, and you might be just better off keeping the property. Shh. Just walk away and see what happens, right? Sometimes you walk out the door and their tune will change. And now look at all these techniques, right? Now we're going deep. We're trying different ways. If one thing doesn't work, we CYA, right? That's change your approach. And so if we hit rock someplace else, we dig in a different spot and try to go deeper. Okay. Let's review. There is nothing that will drive me crazier or your bank account crazier than you playing at the surface, right? 80% of sellers aren't going to tell you they're motivated and don't even know that they're necessarily motivated. People are concerned that you're going to take advantage of them. Okay. Of course you're not, but they look at you sometimes, some people, as a used car salesman, because they know that you're going to try to buy their property for less than they can on the open market. And that's okay, right? But you want to let them know that you're going to be transparent about that. Listen more, talk less. Ask better questions, use open-ended question, right? What is going to happen if? What are your plans if, right? What is going to happen when blank? Don't glaze over. If the seller is not answering, ask a different way. Go back, ask again, ask again, ask again, right? Sometimes the seller, you need to ask in a different way. If they finally don't, if they won't share, you can move on, okay? But sometimes you got to do the give up, okay? The give up is where the seller's not given information, but you send some kind of motivation. Just build rapport in person or on the phone. Build a friend, let the air out, and then try to come back later. That works at least 50% of the time, by the way. You can go on the appointment, build rapport, ask the tough questions. I already said that. Get commitments at the end of the conversation to flush out objections, have them define the very next step. And boy, man, that is my favorite truth extractor right there, is pushing that. That's a doozy. You want to send an offer that will flush out a lot of objections. Or if someone calls you back, man, that, listen to or watch what people do, not what they say. So when people call you back after you send them an offer, after they initially said, I'm not interested, that tells you more. And then lastly, don't be afraid to walk away, right? Because if they walk away after all this, it wasn't a deal. And if they come back, hey, maybe we got a big five-figure, maybe even a six-figure paycheck in the works. So if you enjoyed today's episode and you have not downloaded a copy of the script, go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script. If you want to know more about these techniques, head on over to nolimitssalessystem.com. There's some free videos there. If you just want to buy direct, go to nolimitssalessystem.com/backdoor right to the cart, and you can buy the system there. Talk to you soon.